Okay, welcome back for our final hour. For those people asking for the password for the recordings, please put in your personal banking password details. I'd really like to be able to use those to siphon funds from your account. So feel free to put your internet banking password in as the password to get the recording. I don't say that it'll work, but if you want to try a password, why not try that one? So let us talk about something a little bit different, and I am going to show you something which I think is pretty cool and incorporates a number of capabilities with the entire suite. So all of this security, we can use parts of Microsoft 365 to make life much easier for us when it comes to automation. Now, the way that we do that is we use Power Automate. So Power Automate is an included service in Microsoft 365. So you'll see here that I have a number of different flows. So these are automated processes which, as you will see, basically go through a number of actions. So if we go in and have a look at this one, in essence, what this one does, it will basically be manually triggered. It will go and get basically the login and the password for an environment, and then it will return that data, okay? And then it will create an item in SharePoint. So if we go out and have a look at the output here and go to the end result, just so that you can see what it looks like before I actually run the automation process. Okay, so I have, unsurprisingly, a standard Microsoft list here with secure score, right? So you can see when the item was created. So yesterday was the last time I ran it. That's the current secure score of my environment. That's the maximum score that I could receive, and that's obviously the calculation, the percentage calculation. So now, if I go out here and I go and run that, because it's a manually triggered environment. So I click that, you'll see that the flow will run. It will say here that it is running. So in a sec, hopefully that will be complete. So what it's doing is it's logging into the environment. It's doing a lookup of the secure score. It's returning that basically, to the flow, and then writing that information to that list. So if we go in and have a look at the execution here, you'll see that it's all executed as expected, and it should show us each individual item. Okay, so let's try it once more. You'll see that it has run successfully. So you'll see that it triggered, it initialized the variable, it got the login and the password details from a secure vault. It then went and ran a API call. That's what that is. And then it wrote to the SharePoint list. So if we go and have a look at the SharePoint list, you'll see here is our new item here a few seconds ago. And unfortunately, the current score hasn't changed. So what I've been able to do here is I've been able to automate security processes using Power Automate to do the hard work. Now, what I could do here is if I go in and create a new flow, and you'll see here that what I can do is I can create a scheduled flow. So I could create a flow that starts at a certain time and runs every month, day, minute, hour, second if I wanted to. So I can trigger it manually, or I can trigger it in an automated manner. So what you could do is you could set up an environment that does the same, goes out and grabs the secure score of every single tenant that you have, and then reports it into a SharePoint list or spits it out to Power BI, or does something like that. Gives you the capability then to start managing that. You can do that in an automated way, so you never have to touch anything. Once it's set up, it'll just do that on a regular scheduled basis, right? So that is a good example of what is possible. Very straightforward. As you have a look at the flow here, the flow is particularly, is fairly straightforward. It's a linear flow. There's not much to it. Basically, you'll see here it just gets a login and a password. It runs a web request, and it spits it out to SharePoint. So effectively, only a three-step, a three sort of step flow. Very, very easy to set up and use. So again, hopefully people think that that's pretty cool. So again, if you think it's cool, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see if that enough people think that this is it's a worthwhile option, because I do have another one up my sleeve I can show you. But let's see, are there any people out there still listening at whatever time it is? What's the time here? 4:13 Sydney time. Okay, so that's the basic approach, right? But let me show you something that I think is even more powerful, right? So what I've got here is another flow. Now, what this does is the same sort of concept, but what it does is that it goes out and, again, gets the login and the password, and then what it does is it runs another request here, but let me show you the end result here and see if you can guess what it does. So what it does, in effect, is that it will go out to Defender environment, and it will go out and return all the vulnerabilities or all the things that I need to go in and patch and update in my environment. So you'll see here on the Inspiron machine, I need to fix this. So if I click on this, it will tell me, what that vulnerability is. Okay, so it's all linked, all automatically done. You'll see that this relates to Chrome, this relates to Teams, this relates to Edge. So these are all the recommended updates, right? So again, nice and easy to do. And then over here on the right, what I've done is I've taken the severity rating of each, and I've used conditional formatting on that. So when it's high, make it this color. When it's low, make it this color. Now, sticking it into a SharePoint list gives me a couple of really cool capabilities. So I can go in here and say, you know what? I want to group by severity. Okay, and now you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vulnerabilities across a couple of machines here that I need to address. So you can see here, this is now ranking the severity, so I can determine what I need to have a look at across all my machines in one nice view. I can also pull this down and I can group by my vendor. So I can look and say, okay, well, this is what I need to do to go and fix 7-zip. This is what I need to go and fix for Google. This is what I need to fix for Microsoft, and so on. So the way that basically happens is that I, again, go and get a login to an environment, right? That's held in something called Azure Key Vault. And that then allows me to go and look at the existing items. So that's what this is. This item will go and look at what's already there in that list, and then it will update that item based on the request, the API request that it makes here, the Authenticator request that it makes here. It will then pass the results. So it will basically get JSON back, which is like XML formatting, and then it will take that and spit it into that list. So now what I can do is, again, extend this to an environment where you are looking after multiple tenants. So it is possible with a little bit of extension is that what I can do here is that I can extend this to multiple tenants. So at the moment it's only doing one, but I could loop through all the tenants that I'm looking after and find the machines that are most vulnerable, and I can group the vendors that I need to address and patches and updates. I can spit it out in Power BI. The world is my oyster, right? I've got full control of the data. Okay, so again, relatively simple to do and set up. There's a little bit of setup, obviously, to do that, but as you can see by the actual Power Automate, it's a pretty straightforward thing to do. Not a lot, not a huge amount involved in that. Oh, excuse me. Sorry for that. Now, who thinks that's cool? Come on, give me a thumbs up. Give me a smiley. Give me a thumbs up. Come on, it's getting late in the day. We need some incentives here. Thank you very much. All right, so I can go one better than that. Let's have a look at some other flows that I've got here. So this one here, what it will basically do is it will read the message center, the reports from Microsoft. So, this is changing your tenant, this is being updated. And what it will do, if you have a look at this edit, it will basically go and create a task, right, in a Planar project. So if I go out here, go into my apps, excuse me, and go into, oh, that's interesting. Huh. I wonder if no, it's not. So there's Planar. So what it does is it will basically spit this out into, where are we? It will spit it out into Message Center. So here are all the tasks that were created. So this is a typical Message Center communication. So it spat that into Microsoft Planar. Now that's really good, but not everybody uses Planar, and it's a bit cumbersome, and it sticks at everything in one to do, and I could manipulate it out there. But a better place for this stuff to live is probably inside Teams. Okay, so if you have a look at the flow that I set up, once it ends up in Planar, then it does a few little jiggery pokeries to tidy up how it appears, and then it will post it into Teams. So that's what it's going to do down here. So if we go and have a look at Teams, so I have a team here that has all this, and we go in and we have a look at the news, right? So these are all the news articles about Microsoft, but there's one here called Message Center. Okay, and you'll see here are the messages from Planar and the Message Center ultimately. So if I open that up, that formatting that I did, again, does some bolding, does some underlining, makes it a bit easier to read. So in essence, that's what all these things do here. These compose items basically go in and largely, tidy that up and improve it. Okay, so there are 3 examples that are pretty straightforward to implement. One is the ability to suck secure score into, SharePoint list or whatever you want. Could be the Dataverse, could be anything, any data you want, and you can do that across multiple tenants. You can also do that with the vulnerabilities. So I've sucked all that information from my Defender for Endpoint capability. So that information does appear in Defender Endpoint portal, but I pulled it into somewhere else to work on it. And the Message Center capability to export that information and push it into Teams where it's more obvious for my users to actually see what's going on, because again, not everybody's going to read the Message Center, not everybody's going to look at their emails to see what's going on. I found that to be a much better way, because if you have a look at this, one of the big advantages here is now somebody can go in and they can reply to this change. They can say, well, this is no good, or watch out for this, or let's do this, or thumbs up. So again, I can go in and say, that's really great. I'm really keen for this change to come. So I'm adding additional value into that. And of course, what I can do is I can go up here and let's do a search for, 2x2 maybe. All right, and you'll see that I can go in here and do a search for, exactly that item. So to me, this is a much better way, a much more productive way of presenting information. At the end of the day, you can achieve a hell of a lot of stuff here using Power Automate. You'll see that I've got a lot of automation capabilities going on. It gives me leverage. It gives me the capability to punch above my weight because I put the time in to, learn how to do this, do the interfacing. And this is something I'd recommend that you can do to obviously be more productive, but provide that point of differentiation. You can, set up the ability to export to Power BI for dashboards. You can do basically anything with it. The world's your oyster. So this is what I like about the Microsoft 365 environment. It gives me that capability. If I was locked into a third-party management provider, aka RMM tool, limitations, right? It's like anything I want is not going to be there. I'm only going to get the standard capabilities. And guess what? It's all standard stuff. What I learn in Power BI, I can sell. What I learn in Power Automate, I can sell. Those capabilities across every single customer tenant. So To me, there's far more opportunity in using all of those tools. The best way to start is obviously go and have a look at Power Automate, and then if you go into the templates will give you some basic starting options here. So, for example, reporting weather, moving attachments from your email to your OneDrive, doing all that sort of stuff. So go in there and have a look at the templates as a great place to kick off learning. All right, let me see. Are there any questions? Can Flow check for password strength? Well, obviously, as long as the data is somewhere, an API call, yeah, absolutely. Flow is just an automation process. You've got to have something that does that. Again, password strength is largely irrelevant in my opinion. The Azure AD is going to force a minimum requirement, and again, it's going to be strong as it is. So Azure AD passwords have to be strong. Again, what's your definition of strong? Okay, so I don't think that would be necessarily a worthwhile thing to do, but the answer is yes, you could do that as long as you could find an API call that does that, and I'm sure there would be. So again, at the end of the day, it certainly is possible to do that. Is there a reference library API calls? Yes, absolutely. So again, there are full documentation for all the APIs. You just need to, what's your endpoint? Is it Azure AD? Is it Defender? Is it whatever? So again, all of this is documented. All of this is available. All of this is accessible using things like PowerShell as well. So you can do it in a script as well. And that's how I access and do my Intune and my endpoint manager stuff. I do that all basically via the Graph API. Okay, so again, that's all capable. All right, any other questions? We're happy to go on. So let us talk about legacy authentication, basic authentication. So if you see any credential requests like you see on the right there with login and password in the same dialog box, that is using legacy auth. Okay, that is using old world, typically in clear text password requests. Modern authentication, you will see a login, sign in as you see, and then a password and then MFA. So the first thing to remember is that legacy auth does not support multi-factor authentication. Okay, so it does not support multi-factor authentication. It also does not support conditional access. So if you have users who still have, or you still have legacy auth enabled in your environment, then an attacker can bypass conditional access because legacy auth does not use conditional access. Now, many people seem to believe that if you turn on MFA, that makes you secure. No, it doesn't, because you need to also disable legacy authentication. So when you enable MFA by default, it leaves basic authentication on for compatibility reasons and gives you a number of app passwords. When you turn on MFA and you have legacy auth enabled, you will be prompted, or the user will be prompted for, will be shown one app password. What's the problem with one app password? Well, the problem with one app password is that I can now use a password spray attack to try and guess that app password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bang along to those users with random passwords. I don't care if the password is not human readable, don't care, right? So any app password is in a standard format. It uses upper and lowercase numbers, and it is of a certain length, 8 characters, I think. So again, that gives me a nice defined set to randomly work through all the passwords in the background. And this is an example of, if you look in your logs, right, you will see, again, attempts to get in via legacy authentication. So if we go into our environment here, do we have our Azure portal open? Nope. Okay, so let's go back to portal.azure.com. And this is one of the things I suggest you go in and check. Go into your Azure AD, go into your sign-ins, Okay, as we showed you before, go in and add a filter here and go in and select client app, right? So the client app option, select that. Then click that and you'll see this is all the legacy authentication methods that are possible connection methods to your environment. So select all of those, go apply, and this will show me any legacy authentication attempts to connect to my environment. And because in this case I've turned off legacy auth, it's not happening. There's no connections. But if you go and have a look at a tenant that has legacy auth enabled, you will see failed attempts from Venezuela, Mexico, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, China, North Korea, because they're just banging away with a login and a password, because that's what legacy auth allows. So clients that use legacy auth are old versions of Office. Again, you shouldn't be using old versions of Office. Get rid of them. They don't support legacy. They don't support modern authentication. Anything that's using POP, IMAP, and SMTP is not supporting and is not using modern authentication. It's using legacy authentication. Disable, turn it off. You should be using POP3. You shouldn't be using IMAP. You shouldn't be using old world SMTP. Get rid of it. Right, older PowerShell modules, SharePoint Designer, and again, the big killer here is third-party connectors. So be very careful of introducing a third party into your environment. This is the supply chain issue. If you have a third party backup supplier or you're using that in your tenant, one, you have a supply chain risk there. If they get compromised, you get compromised potentially. And my question is, if you ask those providers, do you use modern authentication? Do you not use legacy authentication? Because if they use legacy authentication, they're going to be a standing admin in your tenant to back up data and access data. And all I need now is a password. And I'm going to guess that password eventually. So again, any third-party vendor that is introduced into your environment, you need to do a due diligence over them. And many of them, when you question them or when you look at them, they are not using best practices, approaches to security. They're doing legacy authentication. They're doing things the old way. So again, verify that if you have third-party tools. Now, 99% of the password spray attacks where I guess passwords are using legacy auth, the old version, and you'll see the majority of them are launched against mail. So they're typically against SMTP, IMAP, and POP. I try and connect to POP using Telnet. Guess a login and a password, didn't work. Try again, try again, try again, try again, try again, try again, and keep trying again. Okay, so that's why we want to disable it. And as mentioned, here's the way you can go in and set your Azure AD audit logs and see whether any of those protocols are being used and work to eliminate those. The reason is because I take a password dump, okay, and I feed that into a script which just goes and continues to try password after password after password after password. Okay, so that's going to be the easy way to do it, and it really is not going to. The only place it's going to be reported is in the logs. Most people don't realize they're being constantly password spray attacked because they haven't got their alerts, they haven't got their logging set up to basically do this. John, no, I don't believe so. I don't think app passwords are at least 20 long. Doesn't matter. They're still going to be guessable because they're static. You should not be using legacy authentication. You need to eliminate it. It is bad security practice. Right? Period. Okay. If you need it to do for an old copier, use SMTP to go. Do not tolerate basic authentication. And Microsoft is disabling it on all new tenants, and it is working through disabling it on every tenant. He's currently looking and evaluating whether tenants use basic auth. If they don't, it's disabling it. If they do, you're going to get prompted to turn it off. So you need to eliminate it. Okay, and it doesn't matter. It's a static password that I can eventually guess. Okay, so again, keep that in mind. Don't like it at all. So if you look at the RSA conference, you'll see that 480,000 accounts were compromised in January 2020. They were compromised because of replay attacks, which are, just basically known password attempts. The 10,000 passwords from Wikipedia. Let's try 1, let's try 2, let's try 3, let's try 4. Now, the thing that really worries me is really PowerShell. So most users' environments are configured to allow PowerShell. Why would you allow your users to use PowerShell? But it is by default. But number one is turn it off. If you have legacy auth, then guess what? Typically, the PowerShell is enabled for that user with a login and a password. I know the login, just got to guess the password. So it's pretty dead easy to get in if you've got a legacy authentication. Now, another thing to watch out for is shared mailboxes. What you may not appreciate is a shared mailbox appears as a normal user in Azure AD. And guess what? You can actually log into a shared mailbox using the web interface. So if my shared mailbox is info@ciaops365.com, I can actually log into that using the web interface because it appears just as a user by default. So there is no need to ever log into a shared mailbox from the web interface. The only way you log into a shared mailbox is through another mailbox via a permissions request from mailbox to mailbox. But unfortunately, when a shared mailbox is created, it is created with a login, a password, and it can be accessed directly via the web, which is not a good thing. So again, my advice is look at your shared mailboxes and block sign-in. That doesn't prevent it from being accessed by users through permissions at the back end with Exchange, but it does prevent an attacker trying to get in. Because if I can get into it with the web interface, what can I also get access to it with? Well, typically, IMAPPop is going to be enabled for a shared mailbox. It's turned on by default to support the compatibility, backwards compatibility. So IMAPPop are turned on for every mailbox, generally out of the box, unless you configure it otherwise. So now I know the mailbox info@, I know it's got a password and it's got POP and IMAP, so I can now spray attack it till the cows come home. And this is what we see. So I've got a number of shared mailboxes hanging out there in the wind, asking to be attacked because I do track it. And you'll see here, here's my email address here, right? So shared mailbox, and you'll see that the client, the person who's trying to get access to it from the United Arab Emirates, is trying to do so using IMAP4. So they've got a processor client that is banging away using IMAP to try and guess the password. Day and night, 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 running a script to do it. So all these things, if configured properly, you don't need IMAP, you don't need POP, you don't need legacy, or turn them off. Harden your system. Make yourself hard to kill. Turn this stuff off. Okay, you can do it once for every mailbox and you can do it for the tenant. It's very, very straightforward. I've got a script that does it. Again, I've got free scripts that will do it for you. They represent an existential threat to your environment. Shared mailboxes are an existential threat to your environment because people don't pay attention to them. And I can use that to leverage. Okay, so protect your shared mailboxes. Super important. All right. The next thing you should do, which is very straightforward, is to implement branding. So branding, you'll see a tenant on the left, generic, a tenant on the right has a different background. It has a logo, it has text. Now, this is not the be all and end all, but it is a step in the process because when stuff is sent from your tenant, sharing requests, and we've all seen the sharing requests that have come from dodgy sites pretending to be SharePoint Online, there's no branding, it's generic. But if you brand your stuff, then that branding is going to be attached to what's sent out to the environment. And it also means when someone is phished or potentially phished, they click on a link, it's going to take them to a site that looks generic. But if you've customized your site, it should make them stop and think, oh, hang on, my site doesn't look like that. My site has got a picture of the CEO. It's got a picture of our office or whatever on the background. So branding is, again, a once-off process like DNS records. You go into the company branding option inside of Azure AD, you upload an image, logos, put in the text there to, again, make this happen. Very, very simple, and also provides, ticks the box for some vanity metrics there. So again, here I am in Azure AD, go into company branding, and then I would go in configure, and then I would, again, upload the GIF in here. I would upload the banner, put in all the details, all the text, and then job done. Okay. So every tenant that you have should basically have, this capability. I don't think that can log into it anymore. Can I? I think I'm in private here, so I can't do it. But if I log into my tenant, you will see it go through, that sort of, I might have it in, let me have a look. Oh, here we go. Let's see which user I'm logged in as. I just need another browser session. I run out of browser sessions. The reason I can't use IE is IE is not supported anymore for Office 365. So let me run it inside this VM here. Okay, run, where are we? Why won't it let me run as a, maybe I've got a policy running. And then let me run, probably jump up and want a startup thingy here. It's never easy, is it? It's never easy. You run out of browser options. Yep. I know you're doing that. Thank you very much. It's obviously pushing down policies. I thought it would go through this. Anyway, I will show you at a later stage. It's a bit painful to go through that. But branding, again, is very straightforward. So do it for your own tenant and do it for your customers as part of your value add. All right, so let us have a look at MFA, right? MFA should be a no-brainer, but so 1.2 million accounts were compromised back in January 2020. 99.9% of those did not have MFA. 99.9%, aka 100%, did not have MFA. Right? The only way an MFA account gets compromised if somebody gives up the credentials, if somebody, accepts the MFA challenge or whatever. It is the best way to protect accounts. It must be on every account you have, and it should be on every account the customer has. Okay, but have a look at these stats. Right? The majority of Microsoft 365 admins have not enabled multi-factor authentication. Right? 97% of Microsoft 365 users are not using MFA. I can't believe that statistic, but again, that's what the study shows. 97% of users are not running with MFA on their accounts. No wonder there are so many compromises. I wonder there are so many issues with malware and distribution. People are not turning on MFA. Go and turn it on now. Turn it on all your accounts, every account you own, Twitter, Facebook, turn it on. It is your best protection. Right? You must enforce that. If people don't want to turn on MFA, don't have them as a customer. They are an absolute liability. They are going to get pwned sooner or later. MFA is an absolute requirement. But people aren't doing it. I don't care if it's difficult. The ability to protect environments is, the major thing here. And you'll also see that a majority of administrators have too much control. And this goes back to that DLP question earlier. Why doesn't a global admin have this level of control? Because it should be zero trust. You only are given permissions that are required as a minimum. Okay, if you want more permissions, you add them. Right? Zero trust means as few permissions as possible. Is that a pain in the neck? Absolutely. But it will prevent, right, the attacks. If an attack or a compromise happens, you want to have them with as few permissions basically as possible. Now, as mentioned, multi-factor authentication is part of every single tenant. Every single tenant includes it for free. Includes it for free. There is no reason not to do it. Please go and turn it on everywhere. Now, the way that you reduce the pain is you set up passwordless. Now, to do passwordless, guess what? You need Azure AD P1. But guess what? You get Microsoft 365 Business Premium includes Azure AD P1. So you can do things like this. So that when a user's prompted, they don't put in a password, they just confirm a number on their mobile device using the Microsoft MFA. So that's the way I do it. Okay. So the idea here is you can use Windows Hello, which I use. So I sit down in front of my PC, it recognizes me and it logs me in with two-factor authentication. I don't have to type my password in. Windows Hello for Business does all that for me and it's secure. That's a major selling point. You get that out of the box with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Go and turn it on. Make it easy for users. Show them the benefits of Windows Hello. Sell them a new PC that supports Windows Hello Camera or biometric or YubiKeys. Right? It not difficult to do, and really it's going to make people so much more secure. So you can actually make it easier to log in using multi-factor authentication and these methods, especially the middle option. And even Windows Hello is even super easy, okay? And those environments where people don't want to put an Authenticator app or the Defense Department and they can't take smartphones, YubiKeys. Lots of hardware tokens can achieve that. It's not difficult, but this is the differentiation point. Take the time, learn how to do it, set it all up. It's very simple, lots of documentation on how to do that. Okay? Go and make it happen. Right? You must have multi-factor authentication. All right, so again, the idea here is that it gives you this capability. So one of the things now that conditional access can do, conditional access is basically capable of using geolocation, and it uses the Authenticator app to work out the geolocation. So you can lock down conditional access by geo-specific GPS, basically. All right, so you can do GPS coordinates with conditional access now. All right. Now you can set up Authenticator to just be approve or deny. I don't like this because users get a ping in the middle of the night when the attacker's working in Russia and they just wake up, push approve on their phone and don't think about it. So I'm against this as an option. It is convenient. I understand that. But too many users don't understand and just go, oh, what's this? Make it go away. Approve, 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 approve. So the minimum I would suggest is they have to match a number on their mobile to a number on the screen. That'll make them stop and think as to, oh, hang on, where's this number? I can't see the number. What number should I be doing? So yes, you can do it and make it this simple, but please, I would avoid this unless there's a very good reason. Now you can do multi-factor authentication via SMS. You can do push notifications. You can do text notifications. Okay. So again, you know, there's nothing stopping a attacker setting up you know, a branding page and all that sort of stuff, right? Again, what I said is this is defense in depth. Okay, if there is enough value in me doing that and it's worth my time and my effort as an attacker, I will do it. Okay, but it is only one measure in many, many, many you should be implementing. And I don't see branding done on many sites at all. And there are ways to set up your branding so it can't be duplicated. Okay, so it can't be copied, or it's very difficult to copy. All right, so again, there's the value add. Work out a clever way of doing the branding to make it very difficult. But yeah, there's nothing stopping people doing that and targeting a specific client. But again, hopefully you've got additional measures to protect the environment. And for the very last time, MFA is the way to do it. Okay, I don't care. You have to do this, okay, along with everything else we've talked about. But MFA is so important and your best protection. Now, as somebody mentioned, that out of the box, Microsoft is enabling something called security defaults. Now, if you haven't run across these, you will find this in Azure AD. What these basically do, turn on a number of default settings that, again, people haven't been turning on. So every new tenant out of the box will require users to do MFA and give them a 14-day grace period to do it. It will require admins to do multi-factor authentication when they do any admin work. Good. Also, they will block legacy authentication. Excellent. And again, they will require multi-factor authentication when necessary, typically when escalating rights to perform work. Okay. So all of this is enabled out of the box. Now, there is a downside. There always is a trade-off here. The trade-off is that when you look to implement your own security, your own best practices, conditional access, it's going to be blocked by security defaults. Security defaults, the only option is to turn on or turn off. Okay, so if we go in here and we go into properties, and Microsoft don't make it particularly obvious, scroll down the bottom of properties here, go to manage security defaults, and this is the only option you've got. Yes or no. And again, most new tenants will have it on. If you go into learn more, it'll tell you exactly what it does. So you're going to start off with a tenant where this is set to yes, but in the long run, you are going to want to set it to no. So you can go in and do things like conditional access and so on. Okay, so it's good that security defaults are now on for new tenants, but you will need to adjust that. You can turn it on for existing tenants, but remember that it's going to block a hell of a lot of stuff. So I would suggest you do that as a checklist for every tenant anyway, manually, and then you really won't need to worry about security defaults. The main thing to remember is it's on by default with all new tenants, and I see the day down in the future that Microsoft will probably turn it on for every tenant anyway. Because again, the not doing MFA, having legacy auth on are just such a big threat, right? Such a big threat that it has to be mitigated, and people need to turn this stuff off, disable it, control it, and they're not doing it. So again, Microsoft, I think, is going to be forced largely into doing it. All right, so we have, I think, probably come to a good point for the end of today. We're about 10 minutes or so out from the official finish at 5 o'clock. I will therefore pause and see if there are any questions on any of the topics that we've covered. So in summary, we looked at the current landscape. We talked about, firstly, enabling things like auditing, looking at your secure score, using that as a good guideline to start ensuring that those settings are there. That's not the end of it. That is the beginning of it. There will be more to do. Make sure all the auditing that is available to you is turned on. Make sure that all the alerts that you wish to have are enabled and go to appropriate locations. Make sure that you have your email, spam, inbound, outbound, spoofing policies set to best practices. Lots of documentation around on that. Then your Defender for Office 365 policies as well. And then move into the things like MFA. Hopefully that's already on, but make sure that is on, enabled, configured, block legacy authentication, look to remove that from your environment as well. So there's a lot of things to do there if you haven't commenced that, but SecureScore would be the place to start. And again, I would tell you to focus on email firstly, and make sure that all your policies, look at the configuration analyzer to do that. If MFA is turned on, what is the best practice for multifunction printers? You use SMTP to go. So SMTP to go is an external service that will relay securely mail from multifunction copiers. I think they have a free tier of a couple of thousand prints or something, emails a month. So look at SMTP to go as the best option for multifunction printers. And again, I would also kick the supplier in the butt and tell them they need to provide a secure device. They should up their game and be providing devices that support secure email, not dodgy devices that don't. But if you do have dodgy devices that don't, send them through SMTP to go. A few bucks is all you need to make that happen. What do you recommend to prevent copying of customized login page? So at the end of the day, there's lots of different ways to do it. And again, they shouldn't be able to right mouse click on the background in the web browser. So if I bring up the URL with the login, I shouldn't be able to copy, I can't right mouse click and copy on the background page. So what they've done is they've taken a screenshot and then they've edited it and they've print shopped it and whatever. So it is a very targeted attack. But again, I think if you do some searching around, you will find ways to prevent that with the style of graphic that you use in the background. So to my knowledge, there is no way to right mouse click and save as in the background there. So again, they've done some sort of screenshot to capture that. Any other questions? And the idea is, again, that you would include not only the background graphic, you would include the logo, you would include the text. And again, the idea here is, are you monitoring your logins? Suspicious logins, conditional access, all of that sort of stuff plays into this. Compliant devices. So it's not about the branding, it's about, the whole component. If they do create a customized branding that matches the client, shouldn't matter, because all your other protections are going to be in there to protect you, and you should be able to detect it almost instantaneously, because your logs are reporting the fact that users are going to different areas, or they're clicking on links from emails. Again, it's this defense in depth scenario. So focus on, the defense in depth, not the individual item, which is, again, relatively rare. It does happen, but again, defense in depth here. How can I download the recording? Obviously, Diego wasn't at the beginning of our session, Diego. So the recording will be made available to you after the completion of all the sessions, which will be tomorrow afternoon. It will be made available via Ingram Micro. So go and speak to the good people at Ingram Micro after the end of tomorrow's session, and they will advise you on how you can receive the downloads from them. My suggestion is that they will probably send you an email Monday to give you a link to click down those recordings. So that, I would suggest, is the way. But the answer to that question is, go and speak to the good people at Ingram about how to achieve that. All right, any other questions? We're almost at time. I'm happy to hang around. People can come off mute. So let's have a look here. Yes, Teams has told me we have 5 minutes to go, but